Hey guys, it's Ashley here at Utah Trikes, and this is a special episode of Trike Talk where we are going to give Braden and Harold the day off, and we're going to talk about something that we've been talking about for the past few weeks. So if you've been watching our YouTube channel over the last 3 weeks here, Davy, Yann, and I have been comparing our top of the line racing trikes that we have. So Davy, we did our first ride together, and what did you start out with?
I started out with the Carbontrike, and you were on the Ice VTX.
Yeah, so we compared the Ice VTX with the Carbontrike, and then Yann, we did the
700 and Carbontrike, and
700 and Carbontrike, and then just last week
we did the, if I remember well, 700 and VTX.
and then the 700 VTX.
Yep.
And then off camera, we had, Davey did get his chance in the seat of the 700.
Finally got to ride it around so I could accurately compare all three of them.
Yeah, so all three of us have been riding all three of these racing trikes, the Catrike 700, the Ice VTX, and the Carbontrike CT2.0. Let's just get right into this here. The comparison between these three trikes, the very first thing that we should probably acknowledge is that there is a pretty big price difference.
Yes, definitely.
So we know that, prices right now are a little volatile and things are changing, but the Catrike 700, we're in that $4,000 price range.
Yes.
And then the VTX, the Ice VTX, we're in closer to that $6,000 price range, a full $2,000 more than the 700. And then another $1,500 on top of that, we have the Carbontrike, right about $7,500. So for accurate pricing view, right on our website, you can see what the current pricing is. And like I said, that is changing day to day here with.
Yeah. And it's in the stock configuration also.
Yeah, and that's the stock. Now, some of the things that we were riding weren't quite stock. Is only going to vary a little bit, I think, with what we were riding there. So first of all, we got to acknowledge that the Catrike 700, as far as price performance, is got to be the winner, I think, there.
Yes, that's probably your best choice. I mean, the best choice if you want to stay on a budget, you want to go fast, you want to keep comfort. I mean, I think it's like a really good package to get started between the racing world and maybe commuting.
Yeah, it's like it really feels like an everyman's racing trike with that price range, and then just how it feels with the seat and everything. It really just feels like an all-around racing trike that's really easy to get into for everybody.
Yeah, so let's get into that. So our first category, and probably the most relevant category for a lot of riders, and one that I know all three of us commented a lot on, really is comfort.
Yes.
So when we're talking about comfort, we're talking about the ability to ride for extended lengths, the ability to ride without your body hurting at all. So all three of these trikes have comfort attributes. The Carbontrike, that trike has a pad on it, kind of a mesh foam pad on there.
Mesh foam padding.
Yeah, and it's adjustable. I found that seat to be pretty comfortable. But that was like on our first comparison when we were going back and forth between the Carbontrike and the VTX. You didn't really seem to like the Carbontrike seat.
Yeah.
And you really liked the Ice VTX carbon shell seat.
Yeah. And like all three of these seats are so different. They all have entirely different shapes, entirely different supports in every different way. But the Carbontrike definitely was like the lowest on the list, in my opinion, out of all three of the seats. It just didn't feel like I had as much support in the shoulders. I like feeling like I'm really resting in the seat, and the Carbontrike gets really thin on the back. and like a lot more padding down on the seat, but just felt like there's a lot of wiggle room up there. Not my favorite.
Sure.
But the padding was my favorite out of all three of them. It was the most comfortable padding wise, just not support wise, right? So it's just kind of depending on what you're looking for in a seat.
So you're thinking more the shape of the seat is what you found to be less comfortable.
Yeah, for my body type and how I ride, not really my thing. But the comfort of that mesh padding was super breathable, and it had a lot of comfort, which I liked a lot. I wish I could apply that to some of my other favorite seats, really.
Okay, so comparing those two, it sounds like definitely the VTX seat is winning for you over the carbon seat. Now, what about the Catrike 700?
Comparing them, it has the most surface area for like your body because it's not a conformed like racing seat like the other two are. Personally, I'd put that at number 2. I love the Ice VTX. It feels like it's built for me, like that seat. Like it goes to every curve of my body. It really holds me in place. The 700 does a great job at that, but it is much more of an all-around seat. The Ice VTX is much more of a dedicated racing trike. So it has like, I know that you didn't really like the Ice VTX seat as much because it just didn't really fit your body.
Yeah, it didn't really fit me.
Yeah, the 700 feels like it's not as curated, but it is a much broader seat and it is still very comfortable. It's just Catrike's classic mesh seat without a whole lot of padding, but it's a classic and it works really well.
Yeah, so it's the only racing trike that we're talking about here that has a mesh seat.
Yeah.
So it has a little bit more give on it. It's got the straps. Now, what about you? When we were riding, you know, we started out with the Carbontrike versus the 700, and then we rode the VTX versus the 700.
Yeah, and I think I'm with Davy on that. I mean, here's a big thing for me. I'm like, you know, I'm a big bicycle geek, trike geek. I'm always searching, and the past few years, the tendence, like literally, like switch around from being really uncomfortable to be fast to actually being comfortable and keeping the speed on the long run. So I love long distance. So I have to be honest. The Catrike have the best seat to me. It fit my body perfectly from my hips to my shoulder. And I might not be, let's say, I might hold 15 miles per hour on the Catrike. I probably can hold that for 200 miles. The VTX or the Carbontrike, because of the seat, I might hold that for 100 miles. See if that makes sense. I might be a little bit faster, but less. So it's true that comfort, I think, like in the short distance, the seat on the Carbontrike and the VTX are perfect. On the longer distance, you really have to be this person that's going to fit the seat. Which good news is on both of those trikes, I know they have different sizes. So you can, I think they have a medium, a large. But for me personally, with my shape of body, I probably go long distance. I probably go with the Catrike to be sure that I won't have any like issues with my bike.
Yeah, the one thing that we found, both of us, when we were riding the 700 versus either of these other trikes, was immediate comfort when you get on the mesh seat. Like it is so noticeable when you switch from a hard shell carbon fiber seat and then you get on a mesh seat. Like what I noticed right off the bat was the upper shoulder support that is pretty much completely lacking on the carbon trike and is barely there, I felt, for me on the Ice VTX seat. But as soon as you sit down on that 700, just that immediate comfort.
Exactly.
Now, while we're talking about seats, and you've already kind of mentioned the effect that the seat has on the speed of the trike, I think that is probably the biggest balance there. It's comfort versus speed versus long distance speed or short distance speed.
Yes.
And where you really notice that is on the hills.
Climbing, I love the speed of the Carbontrike. I was feeling better on the VTX because of the shoulder wings and the shoulder, the on the hips there have little wings too, make me feel like secure.
Really holds
But
you in there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, as soon as I will start really pushing, and on the trike, I really feel like that when you're pushing on those pedals, you can feel your back pressing against the seat. The 700 was definitely a little bit slower, but more comfortable also climbing.
Sure. Well, that's an interesting thing that you brought up there. Davy and I noticed specifically when we were doing the Carbontrike versus the VTX that both of those trikes with hard shell seats, how they channel your power just right into that back wheel,
Yeah.
but with different parts of your body.
Yeah. Like
Yes.
the dispersion of that power is entirely different because of the seats. And it's really interesting. I personally like the VTX more because it really, the powers go directly from your feet to like your hips and lower back, which I prefer. But on the Carbontrike, it goes up more into the upper back and the shoulders pressing into the back of the seat.
Yeah, and that's I felt that as well, and it's very unique when you switch from one to the other, where your legs are what's moving you, but then you feel it in the rest of your body. And so riding the Carbontrike, I felt like it's my whole body is using the trike to push me forward.
Yeah.
Where I am definitely feeling that more in my upper back and shoulders, and then in the VTX with that lower part of your like you said, your pelvis area.
Yeah.
Yeah. The bottom bracket height, so the general geometry of the trike has to do a lot with it.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting too. Yeah, because
Well, one thing that we were talking about when we were riding, the 700 bottom bracket height is quite a bit higher.
it's the highest of the.
Yeah, and so when you're sitting on it, it's more like you're doing almost a leg pressing style motion. And we commented on that where when you're riding the Carbontrike versus the VTX, the actual pedal motion and the muscles used isn't really, well, it's not that much different though. You did feel it a little bit, but as soon as you get on the 700, it's like a whole different group.
Yes.
You know, where like on the 700, it feels more like you're using like your upper quads. And I was feeling, especially on the VTX, where I was using more of my calf muscles, which, you know, is more of this lower bottom bracket spinning motion there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel this way.
Well, tying back into comfort here, and I know it's hard to rank them because there are specific use cases.
Yes.
You know, you would say, like you said, you know, it's more comfortable for the type of ride that you're doing. I'm with you where I feel like if I'm riding this trike every day and I'm commuting, the 700 is definitely the winner as far as comfort goes.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I can ride that 700 all day long and without having the body fatigue.
Yep.
And I love riding the other two trikes, but I definitely feel, you know, especially with the Carbontrike, like a day after you ride that, you still feel it in your shoulders a little bit, you know? And then like the VTX is kind of right in between the Carbontrike and the 700 in terms of comfort.
But comfort wise, I was paying a lot of attention to like vibration and road vibration as you were riding. And on the 700, I was noticing that the most. In my opinion, like the seat's one of the most comfortable, but when you're on like a bumpy, rough road, that wasn't as comfortable for me as something like the VTX or the Carbontrike. I feel like those frames were absorbing those vibrations a lot more than the 700.
That's really interesting because that's exactly the direction that I wanted to go.
Oh,
you know?
awesome.
So yeah, going from like seat comfort, it's actually, you know, a different aspect of the comfort is the riding comfort.
Yeah.
So when we were first riding that first time, I was on the VTX and you were on the Carbontrike.
Yeah.
And then we switched. And one thing that I really noticed on the VTX is that same kind of channeling of the road vibrations. And I had a VTX for years, and I've ridden the VTX a lot. And on bumpy roads, like I feel like the vibrations kind of get channeled by that carbon fiber seat right into my upper chest area.
Yeah.
And I think on some of these videos with all of us riding, you can hear that in our voice depending on the trike. So it's not bad microphones, guys. It's actually the road vibration that you can hear as we're riding, because all of these racing trikes, they are much stiffer, harder. They all have the same high pressure tires.
Yeah.
They're meant to go fast, and comfort is secondary to that in some aspects. As far as we're talking about riding comfort, there's two issues that I'd like to address. One is the cockpit riding experience, and then the other is the actual on the road riding experience.
Yeah.
What you experienced with the 700, Davey, was that stiff aluminum frame and the vibrations.
Yeah.
Right?
I was feeling a lot of that. And like throughout all of them, it was really interesting to see how those vibrations were like distributed differently. Like on the 700, I was feeling a lot of that in like kind of on the front end. I was feeling that on my hands and kind of on my feet on the pedals, where it was kind of on some parts, it was kind of hard to keep my feet on the pedals, which for a 700, I would definitely go with either like strap pedals or like clip-on pedals for something like that to really keep you situated in there. But then on the VTX, I was feeling a lot of it in my chest, in my body. And then in the Carbontrike, I think that was the one where I felt the most minimal amount of vibrations.
Yeah, I would go there too. Well, first of all, you're the only guy that doesn't clip in of the three of us.
Yeah,
so you'll actually see on our videos there that we did where we ended up having to swap pedals each time we rode. So we're not experiencing the feet like that. That didn't ever even occur to me. What I would say though is my experience is road vibration wise, I would say that the VTX is where I felt the most vibration. And I think the combination of that stiff aluminum plus that carbon fiber shell seat, and it just kind of channeled that vibration right into my chest. Where the 700, I felt you could feel the road vibration. It's kind of like what you said, in your hands a little bit more, because it does have that direct steering. But the mesh seat, I think, has the most give. Yeah. So that could possibly be kind of a body type difference. But the Carbontrike, like,
it's smooth.
It's smooth. And that's actually what's crazy to me, because that carbon frame, 100% carbon frame, just feels like it takes the road vibrations and absorbs them and doesn't really pass them on to you.
Yeah.
I wish that the seat comfort matched that a little bit better.
Yeah. But I feel like if the vibration was a lot worse on the Carbontrike, it would be much more like it would impact that comfort because of the seat. But because it is able to negate those vibrations a lot, I think it kind of evens out with like that seat comfort as well as the vibrations. I think I noticed the vibrations on the 700 the most is just because it was sending it mostly to my hands and my feet. I think you guys weren't noticing it as much because you guys were locked into the pedals. But for me, on those really bumpy parts, it was hard to keep my feet on those pedals. Where that, I think that's what impacts the riding experience most for me. I can deal with the vibrations in my body, but when it's affecting like my feet and my hands, that's when I notice it the most. So I think on the 700, you just need clip-on pedals.
I think on any of the racing,
100%. But comfort-wise, I think on the 700 it's the most noticeable.
Well, and I think something interesting to point out too on the Carbontrike is we have a monocoque carbon trike, which if people are not familiar with it, the two other Trike VTX and 700 are tubing. a monocoque carbon is literally built in a mold with bladder. So when you think of this, even with this compartment, there's way more. I guess the right word would be kind of suspension, even if it's not real suspension, but it's easier for the carbon if it's well designed to get the vibration. Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's something, and the pad is way thicker too.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think that helped a lot with all of this absorbing the vibration. Yes.
Right.
Yeah, I think so too.
The other aspect of the riding comfort that I want to address is the actual cockpit area. So one very unique aspect of the 700 compared to these other trikes is that cockpit. When I'm in the 700, I feel like I'm in it. You know, part of that is the higher bottom bracket height.
Yeah.
The handlebars are a little bit higher. The mesh seat feels like it's angled down a little bit more. So I feel like I'm inside of the trike, which is a pretty cool experience.
Yeah.
Where I feel like on both the VTX and the Carbontrike, I'm sitting on the trike. Yes. Yeah. And it's, you know, a lot of you guys out there, you haven't ridden these trikes, and so we're trying to convey what these are like to ride. And it really is a unique experience when you get in these trikes and you actually feel like you're in the trike. You know, the 700 to me feels like I'm in a fighter jet. Like I'm there,
exactly what
and I'm riding.
Yeah, no, but it's true.
Yeah, and it's part of that feeling too, where I feel like, hey, I could ride this all day long, every day. For me, I felt like the VTX, the handlebar position was a little bit low for me and a little bit less adjustable. The Carbontrike, the handlebars are a little bit higher. I think both the Carbontrike and the VTX could benefit from the addition of some wrist rests.
Yes.
Definitely.
Because that's one of the big problems I wanted to point out too between those is that in the 700, not only you have this support on your shoulder, but you got those wrist rests. And sitting higher, you just got the right angle. The two over, and especially the Carbontrike, for me, I feel like my shoulder were going back and I was holding those handlebars. And so it was just like my whole arm kind of was hanging.
Like the only thing keeping your arms on the Carbontrike is you holding on to the handlebars.
Exactly.
If I let go, I feel like my arms are going back.
So some type of wrist rest, and also on the VTX will be awesome, and I think that will change a lot of things too. Yeah.
Yeah, the handlebars are unique on all of them. They definitely all have a different feeling.
Yes.
The Catrike 700 is the only one of the three that has direct steering. Yes. And it has the two-piece adjustable handlebars, which I really like. I've always liked the Catrike handlebar setups because you can take your handlebars, loosen all the bolts, and just kind of wiggle your hands until your arms just naturally rest where you want them. So you can push them in and out. You can go sideways. You can actually rotate the angle, get all of that adjusted exactly where you want it. Where the handlebars on the VTX and the Carbontrike are in a predetermined position.
Yes.
There's a little bit of adjustment.
You can just do like forward, backward, and a little bit of wave, but there's definitely no angle adjustment, which I truly believe is one of the most important. Because we hold kind of, I mean, you know.
Yeah, you rest your hands. You're not usually resting them exactly upright. Your hands kind of naturally.
Yeah, there's always a little angle, and if you, I mean, I hurt my wrist once or twice, so I know even like I also broke a collarbone, which sounds weird, but I know that my hands are not equal because of this broken collarbone. So on all of my bike, I have a tendency when people like test ride them to be like, hey, this part seems higher than the other one, but to me it seems perfectly fine. So
yeah, so you can actually adjust the right and left handlebars different, which that definitely the 700 can do that, where the other ones are
Yes.
going to be a little bit trickier to do. As far as that riding comfort, though, it really is kind of a personal experience. I think that cockpit riding experience.
And like talking about like the cockpit experience, the one that I liked the most is probably the VTX because of the seat height. They have like slight differences in seat height and seat angle that, like, riding the 700 the other day, it was kind of hard to see in front of me because you're really laid back. Like, you can probably see on the video, but my knees are in my face.
Which is actually pretty funny, and I'll throw a little bit of the video in here when we're doing this. But that was, yeah, we see your feet in front of you.
Yeah, like my feet are in front of my face the whole time. Where like the VTX, like you're right, the 700 feels like you are in the trike, but the VTX feels like you're a little higher up. I have better field of view. I feel like the seat is kind of cradling me a bit more. And personally, that's the one that I like because of that view.
So as far as the seat cradling you, that's an interesting aspect about all of these trikes. So on our course, we test the climbing of the trike. We go up a hill, then we ride along State Street, and then we come down this fast S curve. And so we get an experience to go as fast as we want and to take some hard, sharp turn. And we get to feel, are we leaning on those trikes? So my experience with these trikes was the 700. Again, I felt like I'm in a cockpit, and no matter how fast I'm going, the faster I'm going, the more deliberate I need to be turning. Like, I need to tell the trike, okay, you got to turn now.
Yep.
And I'm in the trike glued, and it just turns me. Where both the VTX and the Carbontrike, I felt like I had to use some body English for different reasons, though. I felt like on the Carbontrike, that Carbontrike feels like it's glued to the ground, but I feel like I have to lean a lot to stay on the trike.
Yeah.
Like, it's not going, it's not lifting a wheel, it's glued, it's going fast, but I feel like it's going to go there without me unless I'm clinging on and I'm leaning on the trike.
The seat's not holding on to you. You're kind of holding on to the seat while you ride.
Yeah, and I felt like the VTX is a little bit different in that regard, where I'm leaning a little bit more. I felt like I had to control the trike a bit more.
Yeah.
So when I'm leaning to keep all the wheels on the ground a little bit more than I was on the other trike.
Yeah, like the steering on the VTX is really loose.
Yeah, and I think we all
high speeds.
Yeah, we've all been trying to be diplomatic about the words that we use when we're describing, because it's not twitchy, you know, and it's almost twitchy though, to me. Like, it's not twitchy, because twitchy is a different thing, and we've all ridden twitchy trikes. Like, you get on the trike and you're afraid to go fast because the trike has a mind of its own. And the VTX doesn't feel that way. It just feels like the faster you go, the more sensitive the steering is.
Like, it doesn't feel like a Jeep when you're driving that going 80 and like the steering wheel is just wiggling everywhere. It's just like the faster you're going, the more like the touchier it is.
Right.
So it's a little harder to just keep it straight. And with like small bumps, you just kind of got to correct a little bit. It's just loose.
Yeah, and I think one thing, you know, we looked at all three of the trikes, and the Carbontrike and the Catrike 700 both have very similar frame geometry.
Yeah.
Particularly the caster angle of the head tubes is more inclined, which is going to give you more straight line tendency. And I think that that's the biggest explanation for what's happening. The faster you go, it just wants to lock in, it wants to go straight, where the VTX is a little bit more relaxed. And then when you combine that with the underseat indirect steering, that's like power steering almost, then it gives you that a little bit more sensitivity.
Yeah.
Like out of all three of them, I think I enjoyed the steering going downhill on the Carbontrike the most. I think like I love the feel of the VTX the most, but if I could put like that Carbontrike steering on something like the VTX, that'd be perfect for me.
We've talked about the seat comfort, the riding comfort, the cockpit experience. We've started talking about the steering and handling a little bit. All of these trikes are fantastic.
Yeah.
They all steer great. They all handle great. And these differences that we're talking about, guys, are subtle. They're subtle differences.
Yes.
You know, we're not saying like, you know, this is, when we say it feels looser, we're talking about it feels a little looser compared to these other racing trikes. They're all three awesome. So now, Yann, let's deviate a little bit. You've got some experience in more of the racing circuit with racers that are riding on the VTX.
Yeah.
So what records were just set on the VTX?
Ooh, so I mean, there's the 12 hours, 24 hours, multiple time actually. My main racer's got 10 world record. He broke some more at the last World Time Trial Championship. He's going for more next year in February in Florida. So we're talking right now on the 24-hour world record, almost 500 miles. And in next year, our goal is to break these 500 miles in 24 hours. So, and next month, we're doing race across America, which to give an idea, you have to qualify. But so they're all uniquely able veterans, like high-end athletes. The way to qualify and be part of the team, you needed to average 18 miles per hour on at least 200 miles, which on a bicycle doesn't sound crazy, but on a trike and end cycle, it's pretty insane. So the VTX right now, is like, to me, which is kind of come back a little bit on what I was saying earlier, kind of counter it a little bit too, is that the VTX already got long distance record. And I mean, and in Europe, there's even more records, but mostly on track. That's another thing I just wanted to touch really quick when we're talking about handling and stuff, is that the VTX was designed in Europe. And sorry guys, but all roads are way smoother than here. So no, but you know, going back to the
Yann's dissing on Utah road.
And you know what? I think it's fair.
That's hard to believe, Yann. Jeez.
But here is the thing. You guys have amazing downhill, like high mountain and long downhill too, that we might have in France, but they definitely don't have in the UK. But no, yeah, I watched this VTX. I didn't personally do it, but I watched this VTX going down the mountain in Utah, like in South Utah. Sometimes we were in the car behind, following at between 50 to 55 miles per hour, and so. That's why when we're talking about racing trike, we're talking about racing trike.
Right, yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, and I think that the VTX is definitely the trike to beat.
Exactly, yes.
We prefaced this whole series when we first started riding saying that we are not racing athletes.
Yeah.
No.
You know,
Yeah.
We are guys that enjoy trikes. We ride a lot of trikes. We have a lot of experience riding different trikes. But we're not the guys that are out there setting these world records.
Yes.
The VTX, though, definitely has proven itself, and it was chosen by a guy that has also ridden all the other trikes.
Yep.
And settled on the VTX to set those world records.
Yes.
So while we're not out there setting world records right now, you know, we're testing these on these loops so that you guys out there can get an idea of what these trikes are like to ride. And if you're looking for another trike or your first trike, we're trying to help you figure out which trike's going to work for you. The one thing that we have not addressed yet, or one of the things that we have not addressed yet, is hill climbing.
Yep.
we hinted around a little bit about it when we talked about the seats, when you were talking about riding the 700 and how it was a little bit harder to pedal on. I think both of you guys know my opinion. I think that Carbontrike is a hill eating machine. Like, I feel like when I'm pedaling that Carbontrike, it's as easy as walking up the hill. All of my energy propels that back wheel, and I'm riding, I'm going up the hill. And then I would say second to that, climbing wise, would be for me the Ice VTX. And then the 700, which albeit is a more comfortable trike, definitely is not the hill climber of the Carbontrike or the VTX.
Yeah.
But it does have additional gearing, though.
Yeah, which is nice. I feel like I had like a unique experience climbing these hills with these trikes. Because like on the Carbontrike, you're right. This thing eats hills. It's crazy. Like when I'm pedaling up, it feels like I'm pushing nothing but myself up this hill. I don't feel like I'm pushing a trike up the hill. But one thing I don't love about the hill climbing experience in the Carbontrike is the seat. This is where I really felt that the seat wasn't for me, right? Is when I'm pushing, all that the power goes from my pedals to my upper back. And the way that the seat is shaped and how it holds your body, like I feel like I'm pressing myself out of the actual like seat part to push myself into the back while I'm pedaling up, which isn't that comfortable for me. For like smaller hills, I don't think it's that big of an issue, but like preference wise and compared to the VTX that holds you in so well, all of that power goes to like your pelvis area and holds you super well into that seat. It felt like my power was being utilized a lot more efficiently, but it didn't have that weight advantage or even just the feel of the Carbontrike, where it's really hard to say for me which one I liked the most hill climbing wise. I feel like the VTX was the most comfortable hill climbing for me, but the Carbontrike was just the easiest and it felt so smooth climbing those hills.
Sure. Yeah, I think one of the attributes here that your experience with that Carbontrike seat is also again linked to the fact that you were not clipped into pedals.
Yeah, I think so.
And I think this is good for people to know and to hear. So when you're not clipped in, you can only push.
Yeah, you can't pull.
And, you know, where Yann and I are both spinners. And so when you get clicked into the pedals, the motion isn't even a push-pull. It's a spinning motion. I'm spinning around. Every part of that pedal stroke, I'm trying to apply power. And when you're not clipped in and you're just pushing, that I agree that Carbontrike seat is not going to hold you in.
Yeah, no.
You're basically pushing against it and it's gonna slide. It's gonna make you slide up.
Yeah.
Where I think the 700 and the VTX are both gonna do a much better job at holding you in there.
Yeah, and I feel like something that I want to say on that too is the Carbontrike and the VTX. When we're talking about being athlete and stuff, I feel like yes, you have to be a strong climber already to really utilize this power and keep this power going up the hill. When the Catrike is more forgiven if you're not a good climber because of this extra gear you got. I think it's on this one, it's a 3x10, so 30 gears. Yeah. You can really kind of get on your granny gear and just spin, and it's a more forgiven trike. It didn't happen because we didn't climb a hill long enough, but I'd be curious to see on the long distance when you start struggling climbing on the Carbon and the VTX, how does it look like?
Yeah.
Because I bet I have this experience, unfortunately, when I was racing bicycle, where you're like all good and half the climb, you realize your legs are giving up on you. And you see this guy just passing you on his granny gear, smiling and just, and I feel like that. And one more time, if you don't have the shape for it, if that makes sense, yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like the Catrike in a long climb, and I'm thinking, you know, like mountain pass and stuff, if you're not in shape, the Catrike will be better to climb. But one more time.
Yeah, the advantage of having more gears.
Exactly.
You know, you can just You can just gear all the way down to that granny gear and just go up. I'm taking it nice and easy and I'm pedaling
Yep.
up and you'll get up the hill.
Like Dave was saying, it all go back to the seat. You might be at 5 miles per hour, but it's like almost you're in your recliner just spinning.
Yeah.
When the 2 over, I know that when you start struggling and everything start going bad, I don't think they will be as fun.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, we've talked about climbing. We've talked about speed. We've talked about steering. We've talked about comfort. One thing about all of these trikes is that we rode these trikes and switched back and forth, and we didn't do a lot of adjustment between rides as far as really dialing them in to us in between the rides. Some of these trikes are more adjustable than the others. So let's talk a little bit about that. I'm going to use the word adjustability, even though it's not a real word.
Yeah.
But, you know, the ability to adjust the trike for comfort, adjustability, we're going to call it that, right?
Yep.
As far as being able to take any one of these trikes and really dial it in to the rider. The Carbontrike, the VTX, and the Catrike all have adjustable booms.
Yep.
So getting that boom length and that leg length is basically the same procedure on all of the trikes.
Yes.
Adjust the boom, get it where you need it, adjust the chain. You know, that's not really different. Where the differences really start to appear, though, are the seat. And that's one thing that is interesting here, where we've been talking about the comfort of the 700, for example. But the 700 is the only one of these trikes that the seat is 100% part of the frame with no adjustment.
Entirely rigid. Yeah.
It's entirely rigid, but the mesh part can be adjusted.
Yeah, you can adjust the tension on the mesh seat.
Ah.
Yeah.
Depending on how you wanna feel between the tubing. If you want to be like, you can really tight it, or you can lose it if you want to sink in it.
So that was one thing. We had that seat pretty much as tight as it would go.
Yep.
When we're riding, you know, and that I think is important to give it a good comparison to when you're comparing the trike with hard shell seats.
Yeah.
Tightening that seat mesh is pretty important. The comfort, though, can really be dialed in. And I think that's one aspect where, you know, Davey, you being smaller than Yann and I both, where you're going to notice a tighter seat a lot more than we are.
Yeah.
And I think that's why, part of why you even felt more of that road vibration coming through, where I didn't really feel it that much on the 700.
Yeah, I didn't either.
Yeah, and so, you know, you can adjust that seat mesh, but you can't really adjust the angle is not adjustable. The length of the seat is not adjustable. It's all about, it's part of the frame, that Catrike space frame technology there.
Mm-hmm.
So the Carbontrike does have an adjustable seat,
Yes.
but it's kind of
mostly-
unique. Yeah.
It's mostly the length.
Yeah. Yeah, the Carbontrike, the length is adjustable
Yeah.
with the top part of the seat sliding in a channel, and it has quick releases on it, and you can slide up and down. Now, what that does do is it adjusts that curve, that upper curve, where it's supposed to kind of hit your shoulders.
Yeah.
And gives you that direction for your neck to point.
Yes.
Basically.
Yeah.
So that's adjustable, and all of us are about the same height, so I don't think any of us really needed to adjust that much of the seat.
Yeah, we don't touch it.
No.
The VTX, though, is the unique trike here in that the seat is completely detachable from the frame,
Yep.
and there are different size seats available.
Yeah.
Now, the seat that we had on there was the medium seat.
The medium, if I remember well.
Yeah, and I think that alone is probably the reason why I did not enjoy the seat. I think I could use a large seat. I think a larger seat would have fit me a little bit better than the medium seat did. The other aspect is that there is some adjustment in the angle.
Yep, you can adjust your angle to what you were talking about earlier about the way with the Catrike you feel like you were seeing your feet and everything around them. No, on I mean, most racer will go the opposite way for aerodynamic.
Way back,
Usually,
right?
yeah, they will tilt it back. But if you need to, you can really kind of bring it up. And another interesting thing we learn in the racing world is that we were talking earlier about the way you work out with those legs and things, but changing the angle of the seat is literally changing how much power you're pushing through those pedals. By opening basically, I'm not sure in English the name of this part, but
your abdominal area.
Yes. Yeah. By opening and by leaning a little bit more, my racer got a little bit more power. So that's an interesting thing to be able to adjust that seat this way. Yeah.
As far as seat adjustment goes, the VTX has adjustment, you know, where the Carbontrike is barely adjustable and the Catrike 700 is really more reliant on the straps of the seat mesh itself. Now, all of these, it should be noted that there are other pads and meshes available. There's the Ventus seat pads that fit on top of the 700 and the Carbontrike and the VTX, for example. So you can always add more padding to all of these seats without really compromising that experience of having the hard shell seat.
Yes.
As far as the other adjustments go, so the boom is going to be the same in all of them. The seats are a bit different, with I think the VTX being the winner as far as adjusting the seat. Handlebars, we've already talked a bit about handlebars. The ability to really dial in that handlebar position on the 700, I think, makes that 700 probably, again, going back to, it's the most comfortable of these trikes, you know, to sit in and to ride and just to be in. But the VTX, again, we're going back to total adjustments. The VTX has other abilities in the fact that it's comprised of different frame parts.
Yes.
So while not strictly kosher as far as ice goes, there are ice manufacturer made upgrades and changes that you could put on the VTX if you really wanted to.
If you want to, yes.
Like you could go with a rear suspension.
Yes.
The rear swing arm comes right off, and you could put on
the brand new rear suspension one,
even front suspension.
Yes.
Now we're getting into, you know, where some of the other ICE models already have that. But the VTX is definitely a trike that you could really tweak and make. I think you would be deviating a little bit from the racing form factor and leaning into the comfort more, but it definitely, as far as the ability to adjust and dial in that trike for you, it's got a lot going for it.
And that's interesting what you were saying, because I'm just gonna throw it for 30 seconds in the mix. But so I never really seen any racer like messing around this way with a VTX. But I know a lot of people who ask me to turn their Sprint into a VTX, which is really interesting.
You put that same carbon fiber seat on a Sprint and you're halfway there.
Yes.
I mean, you're halfway there.
Yes. You get a little bit more of the comfort.
Right.
So
yeah, as far as other adjustments go, you know, there's the boom length, the handlebars, the seat, and then there's a little bit of adjustment as far as the gearing and components go. Yes. And all of this can be changed. So I don't think that any of that is relevant necessarily to which trike is best because it can all be changed. Like I definitely have an affinity for bar and shifters. I love bar and shifters. I want to be able to just slam all the way from, if I'm in my high gear and I want to jump to my lowest gear, I want to be able to do that. Or if I want to skip a bunch of gears at a time, I want to be able to do that.
Yeah. But it's important to talk about the stock features because trikes are expensive.
Yeah.
And just saying what's on it is really important.
Yeah. And the VTX, that, you know, the stock configuration that we're riding with the trigger shifts on there, I like the little loop cable feature, but that's about the only thing that I liked about the trigger shifts. I'm just not a fan of the trigger shifts.
And one of the big things, they just designed that this year. I had the great luck to spend some time with the guys from ICE, and a lot of those things come down in a stock configuration to industry and who you work with.
Mm-hmm.
And so ICE doesn't really have any, how do you call that, partnership with SRAM. And right now on the market, the only people really making those handbar shifters are SRAM and aftermarket microshifts. So they worked a lot with Shimano, especially the new Shimano Qs that was developed especially to help the industry, you know, to kind of like compact all of those different models that Shimano had. And Shimano doesn't really make any handbar shifter anymore. They have the high end like Dura-Ace, but they didn't really follow up with the industry when they went like 10, 11, 12. And I think Dura-Ace have a 10 and an 11, but one more time, it's road, specifically road, and most trike use mountain bike component to be able to access those, exactly, those big gears. So, I mean, that's something that I definitely has them. The good news is we did some testing here at Utah Trike, and we can pair a micro shift, a handbar shifter to those new Qs.
Yeah.
So that's something that doesn't come stock, but we can do it, customize it.
Sure.
Because yeah, I'm not a big fan either of the trigger. I love the little loop they made. That's amazing. That's genius. But it's just, I think we're talking about it. Now it's in my way when I'm turning, for example.
Yeah, right. Well, the Carbontrike and the VTX both have the doubles on the front. The 700 has the triple. That extra low gear, I think, is great for climbing.
Yes.
So the gear range on the Catrike is going to be a little wider than the other two, but I also feel like it needs that a little bit more to help climb hills.
Yes. Like if you're going for an everyman's trike, you need a wider range of gearing so that anybody can be able to tackle those hills, tackle the different terrains that you're going to be hitting on a long tour or a race or whatever.
Well, let's talk about that as we start winding down here a little bit. Is who are these trikes for?
Yeah.
And I like what you said there. The Catrike 700, in my opinion, is really the everyman's racing trike. You know, it's a trike that if you don't have another trike and you want to get a fast trike right off the bat, the 700 is the trike to get. It's a fast racing trike that is comfortable. It is adjustable. It has the gear range, and you could ride that trike every day, everywhere.
It has a lot of the hallmarks of any other Catrike, just with more of a like more reclined, those racing wheels, the thinner tires. It's more of a racing lean with all of the standard Catrike stuff that we all know and love with those classic space frames.
Sure. And as far as who are the Carbontrike and the ICE VTX for? So we already know racers are choosing the VTX.
Yes.
And the Carbontrike hasn't been as popular. And I think part of that is marketing wise, not that many people even know about the Carbontrike. I think like if you've got a lot of hills, it's a hill eating machine. Is it the everyday trike though?
I mean, personally, as on a pure race point of view, And I think I noticed this. I mean, I said something about it. One of the video is I don't see myself riding the Carbontrike or the VTX in this.
Yeah.
I wear a kit, jersey, whatever you want to call it, and that will be the most comfortable. That's designed to stick to you. Nothing's like flapping, and that make the track more comfortable also. The 700 is definitely the one that I can sit like right now and head.
You can just wear, like I was wearing jeans.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I'm riding, you know. I mean, I was wearing that on all the trucks, and I didn't really feel like I was uncomfortable at all.
Yeah.
Davy did have an experience though where on both the VTX and the 700, as we're going down the hills, where your pants were filling up with air.
Big wide leg pants and the balloons.
Maybe that's not the right gear to wear, you know, when you're in your racing the trike. There's a lot of reasons why I would choose the Carbontrike. And again, I want to preface this with saying that of these three, the 700 is the one that I'm going to recommend to most people.
Yes.
But I love that Carbontrike. I really do. It is fast. It is light. It is damn light. I mean, 29 pounds, I think, as we had it kitted out.
And it's weird because, like, compared to the VTX, it's only like 4 or 5 pounds lighter, but it feels so much lighter than that while you ride.
So much lighter.
I don't know how.
And the fact that, like, I know that there are riders out there that they love climbing hills. Like, you know, I'm all about climbing the hill. And you know what, guys? I'm all about going down the hill. So the easier that hill is to climb, the faster I can get up the hill, the happier I am, because that's when my fun starts, when I get up.
Because the Carbontrike is solid going up the hill, and then it's solid on that steering. It's comfortable going downhill. It's great for both.
And so I feel like that Carbontrike, I'm going to choose for that. But, and here's the caveat, I don't think that I would recommend the Carbontrike to anybody as their first and only trike.
No, oh, definitely not.
The Carbontrike is really for the guy that you already have another trike or maybe even a stable of trikes. You've got, you know, we have a lot of customers that are like that are, you know, they've got trikes to fit the mood kind of thing. And, you know, and I feel like the guy that already has a 700 and he's like, hey, I need something that's a little faster for my weekend rides. That's the guy I'm going to go get the Carbontrike, you know. And why I'm kind of skipping the VTX there, because for me, the Carbontrike has that little bit of an edge. But if you're looking for a trike that you're going to be riding all the time, like every ride you do is a race with friends. You're riding on the weekends and your friends are on fast road bikes, and then you mix it up and you go, well, now I'm riding a century ride, or now I'm going the ride across Iowa. I'm doing long distance rides. That's where I really think that VTX is going to have the advantage for the average rider. The average guy, I think the VTX would fit a lot of people that are looking for their one and only trike. Where I don't think the Carbontrike is anybody's one and only trike.
Yeah.
I think it's the trike that you go, hey, today I'm busting out the Ferrari.
Yeah.
You know, but it's not your everyday riding. It's your, hey, I'm showing off. I'm going fast. I'm busting up those hills. Where I think the VTX, that's my every Saturday racing trike, and my 700 is my everyday commuting to work fast trike.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah, I like that.
And then just for me personally, like they were all super comfortable to ride, but I'm somebody who just appreciates a comfortable ride that really suits my body, is kind of the kind of trike that I'm looking for. And the VTX was that for me. I really liked, I know that we kind of talked about like our body type differences and how you were not comfortable in the VTX seat, but you were a lot more comfortable in the Carbontrike seat because you had that space for like your shoulders to.
I could stretch back a little bit.
But I just like being like cradled in the seat. It is very comfortable. It's really nice. So that's why I would choose the VTX personally. But the Carbontrike is really comfortable. The 700 is really comfortable. I just really like that more personalized feel that the VTX supplies for my body type.
Sure.
One thing I wanted to touch up on really quick when you were talking earlier about VTX and the Carbontrike, who might help also the customers in the future, is that Carbontrike still got elected Best Trike 2019. And when you read the story, one of the reasons it didn't blow up in the next few years was because of the pandemic, which they got stuck in Europe and they couldn't import them here. So that's one of the big reasons. So one of the other things I'm waiting to see is we have the VTX racing trike with a lot of record, but I got a feeling that now Carbontrike is back in the country. I want to see what people are going to do with it.
Yeah. Again, I feel like same way. The Carbontrike just did not have the ability to take off. Lack of marketing, lack of recognition. You know, it comes out and it's the trike of the year, and then all of a sudden, boom, nobody's heard of it anymore.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident that we're going to see something happening with this trike.
Yeah, it'll be really cool.
And that's one of the things. Like one more time, you're saying that those people who are gonna want like this little hedge or try something that you're not gonna see at every corner or at every race. So that'd be interesting to like keep looking at that.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, guys, we are really excited to hear about your experience with any of these three trikes, the Catrike 700, the ICE VTX, or the Carbontrike CT2. We want to know how you're riding, what other trikes you've ridden, and how you think they compare. And if you have any questions at all, let us know. Otherwise, we encourage you to come to our showroom, try out these trikes yourselves. We're happy to get these fitted up for you. You can ride the same hills that we rode, take them out, and see what these trikes do for you.
You're forgetting, if you guys need any help beyond just coming into the store, you can always give us send us an email, give us a phone call, or just check our website. We have a live help. You can ask any questions there. So if you have any more in-depth questions for us, make sure to reach out, and we'd love to help you find the right trike for you.
And relax, spin fast, and ride trikes.
I knew somebody was going to say it. Hey, thanks, guys.
I wasn't sure.
That's what I was trying to get you to say.
I got it after.
He got it.
We all got to do something.
All right.
Cool.